Hello, wonderful person. This is Chris for the Informed Stoner, and it's Monday morning. Time for a news report. Today's news report's coming from CNN. Historic strike leaves Israel at standstill with crowds in streets to protest judicial reform. We got a little video here. Let's check this out and see what they have to say.
The massive protests and the turmoil that are engulfing Israel right now. Live look, this is Jerusalem. You can hear folks are speaking there. There are speakers. There are huge demonstrations.
Just look at that. I know this is just one small area, but so many people
Going on. They continue to rock that country. They want the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to back down on his controversial plan to weaken the country's Supreme Court. Now, this was a scene, check this out, this is earlier at Jerusalem's central bus station, where protesters have been arriving from.
That's a central bus station. People arriving. Wow. That's crazy. Tons and tons of people just pouring into Jerusalem.
All over Israel to make their voices heard. That's the central bus station. Israel's largest union has launched a nationwide strike that is grinding the country to a standstill. Departing flights were halted for hours at Israel's main airport. Workers at Israel's biggest seaport also joined the strike.
That's crazy. I know strikes are not good news for business and stuff, but these people are taking this to heart. You know, this is a topic that really concerns them, and I support their right. You know, they need to stand up for what they think is the way to go.
Meanwhile, nurses across the country are now set to walk off the job tomorrow. Even McDonald's has closed all of its restaurants in solidarity with the protests that you're seeing. Dozens of local mayors say they're going on a hunger strike because of this. We are waiting to hear from the Prime Minister.
Wow, local mayors are going on hunger strikes. You don't see this kind of protest in the U.S. You know, here we get craziness and stuff. I mean, I'm sure they have some craziness going on there, don't get me wrong. But, you know, this is like serious people against what's going on.
He has not spoken publicly, but he did tweet just a few moments ago, calling on those who are in the streets to, quote, behave responsibly and not to act violently. In an interview that he did with Piers Morgan over the weekend, the Prime Minister defended his plan. He argued that Israel's Supreme Court is essentially too powerful. He said he is not trying to destroy democracy with these reforms.
And the opponents of this judicial reform raise, and I think it's a valid concern, and that is you want to go from one extreme to the center. You don't want the pendulum to swing to the other side, where the Knesset, our parliament, can nullify any decision of the Supreme Court. And I think that requires a balance. I agree with that. So it has to be in the center.
So you are going to rein back then on this current proposal?
Yes, I said that.
CNN's MJ Lee.
Okay, so his words, he's going to rein back on his proposition. Well, you know, will they stick to it? Who knows? I can't put words in their mouth. These people aren't happy, though, and as that nation's going to stand up like that, then obviously something is really going on.
Is live at the White House with White House reaction to what's happening. But first, we want to go to Hadass Gold, who is on the ground in Jerusalem. Hadass, we heard from the Prime Minister in that tweet, you know, warning about violence. Are you seeing that play out on the streets? What is it actually looking like as these protests are only getting bigger?
Yeah, as you can see behind me, protesters continue to stream down. This is the road that leads down to the Israeli Supreme Court and the Israeli parliament. We were in the middle of the protesters, but the numbers were so massive that we couldn't get a signal in the middle of it, so we had to come up here. But as you can see, we're probably a good half mile up from the Israeli parliament at least, and we still are seeing just this massive wave of protesters coming in. Today, the Israeli country...
They're a half a mile away from the center, and there's still this many people. That means there's hundreds of thousands of people there, probably. Just tons.
Israeli economy, the country essentially grinding to a halt, this massive strike now. And now there are fears that it could become violent because we are hearing from some far-right extremist group calling for counter-protests. And I have to say that the protests we saw in the...
Now, I have to support everyone's right to protest, no matter what side they're on. Everyone should have that right, as long as they keep it to protesting, not doing stupid stuff.
Last 24 hours, especially last night overnight, especially in Tel Aviv, blocking the highway, going late at night. The Israeli police end up using water cannons on them. They felt different. They felt angrier, and it does feel as though the tensions are boiling over. And that's why we're hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu nothing yet, actually, on whether he will call for a halt to this massive judicial overhaul he's planning. That's what everyone's been waiting on him for. He was supposed to actually give a speech in the morning, and essentially all the Israeli media was saying that he was going to call for an halt, but instead we get this tweet from him saying that he calls on the demonstrators in Jerusalem here on the right and the left to behave responsibly and not to act violently. We are brotherly people. We are also now hearing that Israeli embassies around the world are also going on strike. That means, including the Israeli embassy in Washington.
That's nuts. If the embassies are going on strike as well, that's massive. These people are not happy with what's going on, and they probably have a right not to be.
Washington, D.C., there are no consular services. I have never seen anything like this. The entire country, including the airport from some time, the ports, the nurses, the malls, McDonald's, are all on strike as a result of this massive judicial overhaul.
Wow, that's just nuts. That judicial overhaul has really got a lot of people angry, and they need to pay attention to what the people want. Let's go into the story here. Hold on. Get this window shut, maybe. Maybe not. Oh, jeez. That's not annoying. Oh well. I'll leave it alone. Israel political crisis escalated into uncharted territory Monday as the country's largest trade union announced its historic strike, shutting down transportation, universities, restaurants, and retailers in protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's planned judicial overhaul. Well, as they were talking about, this strike is huge. Everything is shutting down. They're shutting their whole economy down, and people are going to the streets to protest this. If they feel this strongly about it, there's probably something really wrong. I don't know all of it, and I don't know the whole story, but I'm sure there is. All takeoffs from Israel's main airport, Ben Gurion in Tel Aviv, were halted for several hours because of the strike. Workers at the country's largest port in Haifa stopped working. Some universities were shuttered, and some of the country's best-known retailers, including McDonald's and the shopping mall chain Azrieli Group, butchered that, I'm sure, announced closures. The strikes were announced following Netanyahu's decision on Sunday to fire his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who became the first member of the cabinet to call for a pause in the reforms. So in other words, this dude was like, hey, let's slow down and see what's going on. The people aren't liking this, so he fires him. Now the people are really pissed. That's shady. That's really shady. Massive spontaneous protests took over the Israeli city of Tel Aviv late Sunday night in response to Gallant news, with people waving Israeli flags and chanting democracy. Protesters lit several fires on the main highway in the city and blocked a number of streets and bridges, including Alon Highway. In his first comment since the announcement, Netanyahu urged protesters to behave responsibly. I call on all demonstrators in Jerusalem on the right and left to behave responsibly and not act in violent. We are brotherly people, he said on Twitter. Well, that's easy for him to say when he's trying to change stuff on them. I mean, I don't think that they should get violent. They should keep it peaceful. But, you push people enough, they're going to break. It's going to happen. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis, we saw them in that video, tons and tons of them, have been protesting for months against the planned judicial changes, which would give the governing parties more control over the Israeli judiciary. Israeli former Prime Minister Yair Lapid urged Netanyahu to reverse the decision to fire Gallant, calling the move a new low, which is probably true because that seems very political. He wrote on Twitter that Netanyahu might be able to fire the minister but cannot fire the people of Israel who are standing up in the insanity of the coalition. Again, you piss off your base, what are you going to do? He's not playing the best game, in my opinion. In a statement issued later, Lapid called the past 24 hours madness, loss of control, and loss of direction. We've never been closer to falling apart. Our national security is at risk. Our economy is crumbling. Our foreign relations are at the lowest point ever. We don't know what to say to our children about the future in this country. We've been taken hostage by a bunch of extremists with no breaks and no boundaries, he said. Hey, that sounds a lot like another country I know. Calls to stop and recalculate reform. Gallant argued for a halt of the judicial reforms in the speech Saturday night when Netanyahu was out of the country on an official visit to the UK. Some military reservists have pledged to pull out of the service in opposition of the plans, when the critics say it would be undermine the independency of the judiciary. Gallant said pressing ahead with the proposals could threaten Israeli security. Well, yeah, I mean, who knows what all they got packed into this stuff? We're not going to be let in on it. We're not even part of the country, right? So they're not going to tell us. He ousted mass protests. His ouster and the mass protests that followed promptly a string of prominent officials to call for a halt to the judicial reform process. In a Facebook post on Monday, Israeli President Isaac Herzog called for Netanyahu and his government to immediately pause the plans. Deep concern, however, over the entire nation's security, economic, society, everyone is threatened, Herzog says in the statement. The eyes of all the people of Israel are on you, the eyes of the Jewish people are on you, and the eyes of the whole world are on you. For the sake of the unity of Israelis, for the sake of the committed responsibility, I call on you to halt the legislative procedure immediately. Separately, more than 24 mayors from across Israel declared a hunger strike over the judiciary overhaul on Monday. Moshe Fallon, I'm sorry, I'm probably killing these names, guys. I apologize. The mayor of the coastal city of Herzliya posted a statement saying, starting tomorrow morning, we are launching a hunger strike in Jerusalem opposite the prime minister's office, demanding an end to the huge crisis and disaster that Israel is hurtling towards, to prevent the security of the country being affected and for the sake of togetherness and the unity of the country. The statement was signed by 27 officials representing a broad spectrum of local authorities across the country. Amid the protest, Netanyahu is under increased pressure for his own party. Well, yeah, because if he's against his own party, even, what's the dude doing? Economy Minister Nir Barak, Culture and Sport Minister Miki Zor, and Diaspora Affairs and Social Equality Minister Amichai Chikli, again, I'm so sorry. All members of Netanyahu's Likud party also suggested that the prime minister should stop the legislation early on Monday morning. Barkat, a former mayor of Jerusalem, suggested Netanyahu should stop and recalculate his overall plan, warning it has brought the country to the brink of civil war. Where else does that sound familiar? This stuff going around everywhere. I'm not saying it's orchestrated, but there's definitely a lot of stuff falling apart. Reform is necessary and will do it, but not the cost of the civil war, he said. In his speech on Saturday, Gallant said that the pause was needed for the security of Israel, citing the refusal of some Israeli defense forces, reservists to train in protests at the government plans. Gallant reiterated the statement in a tweet on Sunday after his dismissal. The security of the state of Israel have always been and always will be the mission of my life. A constitutional judicial overhaul. Under the proposals, the government would have control over the appointment of the judges, and the parliament would gain the power to override Supreme Court decisions. Okay. So that is a bit dicey. Your Supreme Court's supposed to be the highest court. Your parliament shouldn't be able to I don't know. That's a slippery slope. Government argues the changes are essential to rein in the Supreme Court, which they see as insular, elitist, and no longer representative of Israeli people. Opponents say that the plan threatens the foundations of Israeli democracy. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, because once you can just start pushing through and your Supreme Court really has no power, I don't know. Part of the plan, which effectively strips the courts of power to declare the prime minister unfit for his office, has already been pushed through. Critics say Netanyahu is pushing through the changes because of his own ongoing corruption trial. Netanyahu denies this. I wonder. Yeah, of course he's going to deny it. If it is true, I mean, I don't know. I'm not there. But I would deny it, obviously, if I was doing some sneaky stuff. But I'm pretty sure most people would. Anyhow, hope you liked today's morning story. Please like and subscribe. That would really help us out. And I hope the rest of you all have a great day.